questions.
Okay,
And was even
went to the
beginning
visitor
to
center,
think
got
of
my
telling the
stamps.
king all about his
Now we're
treasure
on
and
the
his
way to
quest,
see
which
Tunnel
shows
Rock.
how low-spirited he had become.
Can't go through Tunnel
When he
Tree,
heard
it's
Bilbo's
under
little voice at
snow.
his keyhole,
And gotta
he
go
could
to General
hardly
Sherman
believe his
Tree.
ears.
They said that's the only
Soon,
two things
however,
we can do right
he
now
made up his
because
mind that he could
everything
not
else
be
is
mistaken.
under snow.
He came to the door and had a long whispered talk with the
Yay.
hobbit on the other side.
Like everything I've
So
gone
it
to.
was that Bilbo was able to take secretly Thorin's message
here
to
we
each
go.
of the
Yay,
other
fun.
imprisoned dwarves, telling them that Thorin, their chief, was also in prison close at hand.
Head north toward California 198 East.
And that no one was to reveal their errand to the king. Not yet.
Continue on California 198 East for 18 miles.
Not yet. Not before Thorin gave the word. For Thorin had taken heart again, hearing how the hobbit had rescued his companions from the spiders, and was determined once more not to ransom himself with promises to the king of a share in the treasure, until all hope of escaping in any other way had disappeared. Until the remarkable invisible Baggins, of whom he began to have a very high opinion indeed, had altogether failed to think of something clever. The other dwarves quite agreed when they got the message. They all thought their own shares in the treasure, which they quite regarded as theirs, in spite of their plight and the still unconquered dragon, would suffer seriously if the wood elves claimed part of it, and they all trusted Bilbo. Just what Gandalf had said would happen, you see. Perhaps that was part of his reason for going off and leaving them. Bilbo, however, did not feel nearly so hopeful as they did. He didn't like being depended on by everyone, and he wished he had the wizard at hand. But that was no use. Probably all the dark distance of Mirkwood lay between them. He sat and thought, until his head nearly burst, but no bright idea would come.
Okay.
One invisible
I thought this was going to be like the Redwoods Park, where it's just
14.
trees
But of
and
course, as you
barn
guessed, he did rescue his friends in the
and mist
end.
and clouds
And
and
this is how it happened.
fairy tale land.
One day, nosing and wandering
Sequoia
about,
is just
Bilbo discovered a very
meadows
interesting
and
thing.
forests,
The gates were not
and
the only entrance to the cave.
there's some big trees here and
A
there.
stream flowed under part of the lowest regions of the palace
That's it.
and joined the forest river some way further to the east, beyond the steep slope out of which the main mouth opened. Where this underground watercourse came forth from the
I
hillside,
mean, it's really,
there was a
really
water
pretty.
gate. There the rocky roof came down close to the surface of the stream, and from it a portcullis could be dropped right to the bed of the river to prevent anyone coming in or out that way. But the portcullis was off them, for a good deal of traffic went out and in by the water gate. If anyone had come in that way, he would have found himself in a dark, rough tunnel leading deep into the heart of the hill. But at one point where it passed under the caves, the roof had been cut away and covered with great oaken trapdoors. These opened upwards into the king's cellars. There stood barrels and barrels and barrels, for the wood elves, and especially their king, were very fond of wine, though no vines grew in those parts. The wine and other goods were brought from far away, from their kinsfolk in the south, or from the vineyards of men in distant lands. Hiding behind one of the largest barrels, Bilbo discovered the trapdoors and their use, and lurking there, listening to the talk of the king's servants, he learned how the wine and other goods came up the rivers, or over land, to the long lake. It seemed a town of men still throve there, built out on bridges far into the water as a protection against enemies of all sorts, and especially against the dragon of the mountain. From Lake Town, the barrels were brought up the forest river. Often they were just tied together like big rafts and poled or rowed up the stream. Sometimes they were loaded onto flat boats. When the barrels were empty, The elves cast them through the trapdoors, opened the water gate, and out the barrels floated on the stream, bobbing along, until they were carried by the current to a place far down the river where the banks jutted out, near to the very eastern edge of Mirkwood. There they were collected and tied together and floated back to Lake Town, which stood close to the point where the Forest River flowed into the long lake. For some time, Bilbo sat and thought about this water gate, and wondered if it could be used for the escape of his friends. And at last he had the desperate beginnings of a plan. The evening meal had been taken to the prisoners. The guards were tramping away down the passages, taking the torchlight with them and leaving everything in darkness. Then Bilbo heard the king's butler bidding the chief of the guards good night. "Now come with me," he said, "and taste the new wine that has just come in. I shall be hard at work tonight clearing the cellars of the empty wood, so let us have a drink first to help the labour." "Very good," laughed the chief of the guards. "I'll taste with you and see if it's fit for the king's table. There's a feast tonight, and it would not do to send up poor stuff." When he heard this, Bilbo was all in a flutter, for he saw that luck was with him. "Good," said Thorin, when Bilbo whispered to him to come out and join his friends. "Gandalf spoke true as usual. A pretty fine burglar you'll make, it seems, when the time comes. I'm sure we are all forever at your service, whatever happens after this. But what comes next?" Bilbo saw that the time had come to explain his idea as far as he would. But he did not feel at all sure how the dwarves would take it. His fears were quite justified, for they did not like it a bit, and started grumbling loudly in spite of their danger. "We shall be bruised and battered to pieces, and drowned too for certain," they muttered. "We thought you had got some sensible notion when you managed to get hold of the keys. This is a bad idea." "Very well," said Bilbo, very downcast, and also rather annoyed. "Come along back to your nice cells, and I will lock you all in again, and you can sit there comfortably and think of a better plan. But I don't suppose I shall ever get hold of the keys again, even if I feel inclined to try." That was too much for them, and they calmed down. In the end, of course, they had to do just what Bilbo suggested, because it was obviously impossible for them to try and find their way into the upper halls, or to fight their way out of gates that closed by magic, and it was no good grumbling in the passages until they were caught again. So, following the hobbit, down into the lowest cellars they crept. They passed a door through which the chief guard and the butler could be seen, still happily snoring with smiles upon their faces. The wine of Dorwinion brings deep and pleasant dreams. There would be a different expression on the face of the chief guard next day, even though Bilbo, before they went on, stole in and kind-heartedly put the keys back on his belt. "That will save him some of the trouble he's in for," said Mr. Baggins to himself. "He wasn't a bad fellow, and quite decent to the prisoners. It'll puzzle them all, too. They will think we had a very strong magic to pass through all these locked doors and disappear. Disappear. We've got to get busy very quick, if that is to happen." Marlin was told off to watch the guard and the butler and give warning if they stirred. The rest went into the adjoining cellar with the trapdoors. There was little time to lose. Before long, as Bilbo knew, some elves were under orders to come down and help the butler get the empty barrels through the doors into the stream. These were, in fact, already standing in rows in the middle of the floor, waiting to be pushed off. Some of them were wine barrels, and these were not much use, as they could not easily be opened at the end without a deal of noise, nor could they easily be secured again. But among them were several others, which had been used for bringing other stuffs, butter, apples, and all sorts of things to the king's palace. They soon found 13 with room enough for a dwarf in each. In fact, some were too roomy, and as they climbed in, the dwarves thought anxiously of the shaking and the bumping they would get inside, though Bilbo did his best to find straw and other stuff to pack them in as cosily as could be managed in a short time. At last, 12 dwarves were stowed. Thorin had given a lot of trouble, and turned and twisted in his tub and grumbled like a large dog in a small kennel, while Balin, who came last, made a great fuss about his air holes and said he was stifling, even before his lid was on.
Floored.
Bilbo had done what he could to close holes in the sides of the barrels, and to fix on all the lids as safely as could be managed. And now he was left alone again,
like an idiot.
running round putting the finishing touches to the packing, and hoping against hope that his plan would come off.
I thought we were actually looking at something, retardo.
Only a minute or two after Valin's lid had been fitted on, there came the sound of voices and the flicker of lights. A number of elves came laughing and talking into the cellars and singing snatches of song. They had left a merry feast in one of the halls and were bent on returning as soon as they could. "Where's old Gallion, the butler?" said one. "I haven't seen him at the tables tonight. He ought to be here now to show us what's to be done." "I shall be angry if the old slow coach is late," said another. "I've no wish to waste time down here while the song is up. Ha ha! Ha ha! Came a cry. "Here's the old villain with his head on a jug. He's been having a little feast all to himself and his friend the captain." "Shake him! Wake him!" shouted the others impatiently. Gallion was not at all pleased at being shaken or wakened, and still less at being laughed at. "You're all late," he grumbled. "Here am I waiting and waiting down here, while you fellows drink and make merry and forget your tasks. Small wonder if I fall asleep from weariness." "Small wonder," said they, "when the explanation stands close at hand in a jug. Come, give us a taste of your sleeping draught before we fall to. No need to wake the turnkey yonder. He's had his share by the looks of it." Then they drank once round and became mighty merry all of a sudden. But they did not quite lose their wits. "Save us, Gallion," cried some. "You began your feasting early and muddled your wits. You've stacked some full casks here instead of the empty one, if there's anything in weight. Get on with the work," growled the butler. "There is nothing in the feeling of weight in an idle tosspot's arms. These are the ones to go and no others. Do as I say." "Very well, very well," they answered, rolling the barrels to the opening. "On your head be it, if the king's full butter tubs and his best wine is pushed into the river for the lake men to feast on for nothing. Roll, 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 rolling down the hole. Heave, ho, splash, plump, down they go, down they bump." So they sang as first one barrel and then another rumbled to the dark opening and was pushed over into the cold water some feet below. Some were barrels really empty, some were tubs neatly packed with a dwarf each. And down they all went, one after another, with many a clash and a bump, thudding on top of ones below, smacking into the water, jostling against the walls of the tunnel, knocking into one another, and bobbing away down the current. It was just at this moment that Bilbo suddenly discovered the weak point in his plan. Most likely you saw it some time ago and had been laughing at him. But I don't suppose you would have done half as well yourselves in his place. Of course, he was not in a barrel himself, nor was there anyone to pack him in, even if there had been a chance. It
see that
looked
down
as
there?
if
Oh,
he
that's
would
pretty.
certainly
Oh my
lose
God,
his
look at that.
friends this time. Nearly all of them had already disappeared through the dark trapdoor, and get utterly left behind and have to stay lurking as a permanent burglar in the elf caves forever. For even if he could have escaped through the upper gates at once, he had precious small chance of ever finding the dwarves again. He did not know the way by land to the place where the barrels were collected. He wondered what on earth would happen to them without him. For he had not had time to tell the dwarves all that he had learned, or what he had meant to do once they were out of the wood. While all these thoughts were passing through his mind, the elves, being very merry, began to sing a song round the river door. Some had already gone to haul on the ropes which pulled up the portcullis at the water gate, so as to let out the barrels as soon as they were all afloat below. Down the swift, dark stream you go, back to lands you once did know. Leave the halls and caverns deep, leave the northern mountains steep, where the forest wide and dim stoops in shadow grey and grim. Float beyond the world of trees, out into the whispering breeze, past the rushes, past the reeds, past the marshes waving weeds, through the mist that rises white, up from mere and pool at night. Follow, follow, stars that leap up the heavens cold and steep. Turn when dawn comes over land, over rapid, over sand. South away and south away, seek the sunlight and the day. Back to pasture, back to mead, where the kine and oxen feed. Back to gardens on the hills, where the berry swells and fills. Under sunlight, under day, south away, down the swift
There's
dark stream
too many
you
singing
go,
songs in
back
this book.
to lands you once did know. Now the very last barrel was being rolled to the doors. In despair and not knowing what else to do, poor little Bilbo caught hold of it and was pushed over the edge with it. Down into the water he fell,